Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great Tuesday lineup ready for you all. Alyssa, who do we have?
The great Rachel Bavard is with us for Team Rising, and she's going to weigh in on the fight between school boards over whether or not mask mandates harm students with disabilities. And author Matt Stoller discusses how the domination of corporate lobbying and defense contractors in our system sets the stage for more wars like Afghanistan.
But first, U.S. officials announced the last plane out of Afghanistan took flight when it was officially August 31st in Afghanistan, making good on an agreement to stay and evacuate until the 31st. The departure of the last American military flight took off from Kabul Airport shortly before midnight local times, U.S. Central Command Head Marine Corps General Frank McKenzie told reporters on Tuesday. During McKenzie's statements, he announced the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the mission to evacuate American citizens as well as third country nationals. He added that though every single U.S. service member is now out of Afghanistan, they were unable to get everybody out that they wanted to. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
In total, U.S. and coalition aircraft combined to evacuate more than 123,000 civilians, which were all enabled by U.S. military service members who were securing and operating the airfield. On average, we have evacuated more than 7,500 civilians per day over the 18 days of the mission, which includes 16 full days of evacuations. Look, there's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out. And there still would have been people who would have been disappointed with that. It's a tough situation.
Well, listen, we can't overstate the significance of this moment. America's longest war in history coming to an end. But what we have to acknowledge, and Frank McKenzie acknowledged this, we left Americans behind. We left between 100 and 200 Americans behind. We have no standing embassy in Afghanistan. We have no diplomatic presence. We have no military presence. And the Taliban and ISIS-K are running roughshod around the country. So I've yet to hear from the Biden administration what the plan is to get these individuals out. And of course, on top of the Americans that we left behind, there are tens of thousands of Afghans who helped us in this 20-year war that are left and are being rounded up by the Taliban. So I just, while I want to pause and appreciate that this long war is over, I don't know that I consider it truly to be when we still have Americans behind enemy lines.
Do we still have military contractors on the ground there? I mean, that's what, I know that they're saying that this is the longest war and that it's over, but is it really? Because we still have a war on terror. And so that we don't have to declare war in order to have military operations going on in the Middle East, as we've seen. So, my question is, who do we still have on the ground? They say, okay, no more U.S. military personnel, but do we still have military contractors down there? Are we still going to be conducting over-the-horizon targeted attacks in Afghanistan? Okay, maybe the official war is over, but is the conflict truly over?
I mean, I feel like we have to be willing to look at things as they are. So if we're talking about ending the occupation of Afghanistan, if we're talking about removing American troops, a president then goes and removes American troops in the face of the hostility of the entire blob, the entire war machine. All of those troops go out, and then you still have people on the left saying, well, did we really end the war? There's still... what if we've got some former Blackwater people who are running around, or we're gonna bomb some drones? Fine. Now the pressure moves, and the over the horizon campaign. End any other operations that are covert or otherwise going on inside the country. That's fine for the left or for an anti-war movement to kind of train its sights on those operations. But should take a moment to acknowledge that, in the face of the opposition of the entire foreign policy establishment, Biden removed these troops, and that is a fact, and it's a meaningful one.
A couple quick things, though. But by all public accounts, we do not have defense contractors or anyone working with the U.S. military still left in country, nor do we publicly have intelligence officials. We have no capability to house them for them to do intel gathering. So I think this notion that we actually have this sort of covert force left is not the case. These are American civilians who are left behind. One is a family from Texas that has 3 times approached the airport with credentials, with U.S. passports, and were not able to get into Hamid Karzai to get on a plane to be evacuated. I think this is an egregious failure. Our basic concept as Americans is we leave no man behind. We left American civilians behind with no plan to get them out. And what General McKenzie said in those remarks was, well, now's the time for diplomacy. We allowed our entire diplomatic presence in Afghanistan to be ended during this. We shut down our embassy and we pulled out every diplomat. So there is no diplomatic process right now. We're basically working with the Qataris and hoping that that leads to something. But Americans are left stranded there with no help from the U.S. government. And then just one quick point that I want to make here. I feel like President Biden and his allies in the mainstream media are trying to set up this false construct that it was either forever war continuing there in Afghanistan or it was leaving the way that we did. That is false. I looked in my own Twitter feed. Back in May, I was advocating for getting civs out then, getting Americans out then to try to get ahead of this deadline that was coming. We had months that he's been in office that he could have been trying to do this. I was in touch with very senior White House officials months ago saying, you guys need to get ahead of this if you're sticking to the September deadline. Instead, we let our embassy fall, we left our weaponry behind, and we left Americans behind. I don't call that success, but I mean, I guess at least it's good the war is over.
I think that's probably why most of us assumed Biden was pushing the date back, right? I mean, the original evacuation was supposed to be May, and then he says, no, I'm going to push it to September 11th or August 31st. And I think a lot of us assumed it was in order to have this sort of measured evacuation that seemingly didn't really happen. Or maybe it happened exactly as planned. I don't know. I mean, who knows what the long game is here, but it seems like the Taliban now are being invited in, which I think personally, rightfully so. I mean, I think we have to recognize them as a government. I do think that we need to, move forward with diplomatic relations with them. So it is what it is. But I guess maybe the optics of it was that Biden couldn't say, yeah, okay, we kind of did a peaceful transfer of power to the Taliban. But looking at how things happen, I'm kind of wondering if that's exactly what did happen, just in secret.
Well, it wasn't a peaceful transition of power. 14 Americans were killed.
That was ISIS, though. That
right,
wasn't
but we
Taliban.
have Americans who are unable to make it to the airport because of an amalgamation of the Taliban, Haqqani network, and ISIS-K. You have the Taliban rounding up peaceful Afghans and killing them. They killed a popular folk singer yesterday because music is not allowed under the Sharia-run law under the Taliban now. I mean, it's anything but peaceful.
Yeah, and I think the big mistake that Biden made was believing the lies that America had been telling itself for so long, believing that this government was going to last long enough that they would have plenty of time, down the road to evacuate the civs and evacuate everybody else that they wanted to. Whether that was 6 months or whether that was a year after the Soviet Union pulled out, that government held on for 3 years. So, the establishment, members of the foreign policy community were saying we have time. This is not a crisis. Up until Kabul fell, practically, you had Blinken out saying, well, it's not like Kabul's going to fall from a Friday to a Monday. Sure, Taliban might be making gains all across the country, but it's not like it's going to be immediate. Biden himself was saying, is Kabul immediately going to fall? Of course not. No, definitely not. We have 300, and he accurately said there's 300,000, people under arms under the Afghan army against like 30 or 40,000 Taliban. Of course they're not going to fall. That misunderstood the dynamic of the confrontation that was going on, and it believed that this fraudulent enterprise that we were calling the Afghan government actually existed on anything other than paper that was just being shuffled up the chain of command. And so there was no urgency to get people out. And I think that is entirely fair to criticize him and the entire blob for not foreseeing that.
And President Biden is set to address the nation this afternoon on the end of the war from the White House. Meanwhile, former President Trump has released a statement saying that all equipment left in Afghanistan should be returned. And if they don't return it, we should, quote, go in with unequivocal military force or bomb the hell out of it. we definitely should not go back in with military force,
Right.
but bombing the hell out of it, we do that all the time. So you guys will remember the bin Laden raid. One of the helicopters didn't work as they were trying to leave, so we just drone struck our own helicopter. That is something the U.S. government does do.
Which was ridiculous because it was in Pakistan. Can't you just sell it to them for like a quarter of the? Like, look, huge discount. You tow it. It's yours. It's worth $60 million. Give us 3 plus a 5-year contract for maintenance. And there have been a lot of people, wondering what's the Taliban going to do with all of this equipment that, is basically designed to break down so that the clients have to then go back to Lockheed or Raytheon or whoever else to get replacement parts and to keep them hooked on the supply from the United States. And now that the U.S. and the Taliban have this mutual adversary running around the Taliban, ISIS-K, you could totally plausibly see a scenario where down the road a little bit, the U.S. says, you know what, we don't like the Taliban, but you know what, the world is full of bad guys and the enemy of our enemy is our friend. So, hey, let us help you out with those weapons that we left behind as long as you direct them at ISIS-K. And what could go wrong? We've never seen this kind of spiral out of control.
Well, one thing I'd note is there's been a bit of there's been some people saying, the Taliban doesn't know how to use this weaponry. That does seem to be the case for a lot of the fixed wing aircraft that we left behind, but there's imagery of them flying American Blackhawks over Bagram and over Kabul. So there's at least a bit of a knowledge. And I mean, listen, we left machine guns, we left night vision goggles, we left plenty of items they do know how to use. But yes, let's hope that they use it to crush ISIS-K and not on Afghan civilians or Americans for that matter.
And they're also going to have advisors from Pakistan who were advised by us. So, they have access to this intelligence. But anyway, we'll have to leave it there, and we will have more Rising for you right after this.